I am pleased to introduce today's speaker, Professor Arulselvan. His topic is on the practice of subtitling and dubbing. Professor Arulselvan is with the Department of Electronic Media and Mass Communication, Pondicherry University. Prior to this university, he served as a journalist for more than 10 years. He has also served as a consultant to UNESCO on its media development project in northern Sri Lanka and established a media resources and training center at Jaffna University, Sri Lanka. He specializes in communication research, e-content journalism, ICT application for education, media management, and media content development. For his excellent and well-versed in documentation, subtitling, and dubbing, Professor Arulselvan was awarded first prize for television documentary by Television Channel Associateship offered by UGC's Inter-University Consortium for Humanities and Social Sciences. He is an author to many books, research articles, and translations. Few of his translated books are Election Reporting Handbook, A Media for Democracy Handbook, and 80 Questions and Answer for Human Rights, UNESCO, etc. These are from English to Tamil language. With this brief introduction, I warmly invite Professor Arulselvan to deliver the lecture. Sir, now the time is over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving a very elaborate introduction about me to this very interesting audience. So, good evening, friends at WCC, and I'm very happy to associate with this program. And I have been associating with the NTM for a long time, and it's a very pleasure and a privilege to join with them, to learn from them, and to associate with them. Today, they have given me enough introduction about my career, my education and other thing, right? And we can directly go to the workshop, right? This is about how to practice the dubbing and subtitling in the with regard to particularly the movie text. Translation, I hope that you have been attending for the last 2 weeks and you have been engaging with the different kinds of means and mechanisms to translate from one language to the other language. This is a completely different domain where creativity is involved more. So before getting much into the idea, that let me start my PPT so that we can directly start understanding what is translation of movie text, right? Give me half a second so that I can upload my PPT. Yeah. So the practice of subbing and dubbing. Before starting to think about today, at the end of the day, we'll be translating some movie text, and we'll try to understand that what involves in the production or translation of thing. To start with, I always go for this kind of ice breaking that is possible with the help of a couple of quotes drawn carefully from the academia about the idea of cinema, right? We all know that cinema is a wonderful medium and is capable of convincing and influencing our thoughts and our process, right? So, but if you look at how this has been looked at by a couple of few directors and a few filmmakers who have been looking at cinema in a completely different angle, which would help you to understand that what we are going to do today, right? To begin with, let me show you one. Yeah, this is actually Werner Herzog. Many of you would have heard about him, right? He says that academia is the death of cinema. It's the very opposite of passion. Film is not the art of scholars, but of illiterates. So it's a kind of extreme position about calling cinema as a medium for illiterates, but it's his opinion, right? If you look at the other guy, that is Godard, right? Cinema is the most beautiful fraud in the world. That probably you may be agreeing to, right? Not like poem, not like short stories and novels. Cinema is a creation where fraud is involved, right? So he calls it cinema is the most beautiful fraud in the world. And if you move further, and there is, we all know about Steven Spielberg, and he says that through careful manipulation, right, not only by creation, by manipulation of the art and good storytelling, you can get everybody to clap at the same time. That is his idea of looking at. So it goes on. I will take up one or two more so that to argue my case, right? Film lovers are sick people. Truffaut says that film lovers are sick people, and the final of the series is the secret to film is that it's an illusion, right? That so through this probably you'll be able to catch up that what I am trying to tell you, right? Films can be tremendously influenced and extremely powerful vehicle for transferring values, ideas, and information. So, film is a carefully manipulated and carefully, it's a kind of fraud. It's a medium for illustration six. And even though we all enjoy film when you're watching a good text and good stories, right? So, but we have to keep in mind that film is not only a creative medium, it involves a lot of manipulation, and it involves a lot of some kind of they go for repeated takes, and they cut and they show very limited frames, and so it involves a lot of not only originality. That's why that these many scholars call it in different languages on different terms of this, right? So the power of film is to surprise and thrill the audience by offering uncommon visual perspectives on things, places, events, and people. And secondly, the ability to present a perfect self-contained illusion of reality on the screen. We all know that, right? Right? Look at whatever the feature film that we have been engrossed in the movie, and we know that it's a self-contained illusion of reality on the screen. That I think that catches the entire mode of these kind of all these arguments. And visually, all of the technical innovations, if you look at all the scientific and the technological advancements in the form of 3D technology, and if you look at the widescreen technology, or if you see the special effects and computer animation, these all have been contributed to the strength to strengthen and to keep the audience interested, right? They all have been contributed and have been trying to accept documentaries that all the feature films that will have the kind of argument that has been put forward by these kind of audiences. Now we'll get into the business, right? Film translation is a form of storytelling that we have to keep in mind, right? It's not just a kind of what you have been doing during the last 1 or 2 weeks, but this is a form of. I have a couple of words. Probably, do you know that the meaning of the term Middle East countries? Any one of you can you answer that? What is the equivalent of Middle East countries in Tamil?
மத்திய கிழக்கு நாடுகள்.
Which countries they refer to? மத்திய கிழக்கு நாடுகள் என்பது எந்த வகையான நாடுகளை குறிக்கிறது? நமக்கு கிழக்கு பக்கம் இருக்கிறதா, மேற்கு பக்கம் இருக்கிறதா அந்த நாடுகள்?
To us it is in the west.
அப்படியே கிழக்கு சொல்றோம். That is actually Far East countries and Middle East countries are the phrases used by American External Affairs Ministry to understand and the news media also. American news media calls the Palestine and Israel. These are all the countries they call it as Middle East. For them, it is the Eastern country. It is in the middle of the Eastern countries. So there are some countries which are Far East, right? So they call it. Then why should we call it as Middle East? We shouldn't call it Middle East, right? But we all, if you look at Indian, very few newspapers call it West Asia. We have to call it West Asia, but we don't call it, right? What I'm trying to say is that you have to carefully choose the words of choice of words. The second one is terrorist. What is the meaning of terrorist in Tamil?
Tiviravadi.
Do you
Tiviravadi.
agree with the term Tivravadi?
Tivravadi is
Extremist.
extremist.
Sir?
Yes. Tivravadi is extremist.
சரி அதுக்கு தமிழ்
Bayangaravadi. Terrorist is Bayangaravadi.
சரி தீவிரவாதி இது எக்ஸ்ட்ரீமிஸ்டுக்கு
Extremist is Tivravadi. But terrorist is Bayangaravadi.
என்ன டிஃபரன்ஸ் தீவிரவாதிக்கும் பயங்கரவாதிக்கும்
Terror is Bayangarav.
Okay. Do you know that
Extremists can be from any ideology and they need not definitely.
I'll tell you one thing, right? It was in before 2000, I remember that UN wanted to define the term terrorist and what is terrorism, right? For example, our most of the freedom fighters, right? Most of the freedom fighters were terrorists to the East India Company and the British government. They called them, right from Gandhi was not ever called a terrorist, but extremist position, people who had extremist position like Subhash Chandra Bose or people who took some kind of militant position to vacate the British army from Indian position, right? British from Indian soil, they took a position, right? So terrorists of yesterday need not be terrorists of today. That's what the history says. That's what UN argues. Terrorists, one should be very careful. For example, two channels. I know that we have been teaching communication at the department. We know that Al Jazeera and BBC, they will never use the term terrorist unless it's very, very qualified, unless it is being substantiated with a kind of so difficult to come out from the term, right? So what I'm trying to say is that look, don't just follow what they have been, what the people are already using it, right? And what do you say about Pak occupied Kashmir? What is the equivalent? Yes, sir. Please come out with one or two terms. Nothing wrong in that, so that I can take it forward. Yeah, Pak occupied Kashmir.
Pakistan Akramippu Kashmir.
Akramippu Kashmir, right? அதே இதை வந்து what the Pakistan call it?
Azad Kashmir, Vidudalai
Azad
Petra
Kashmir.
Kashmir. Vidudalai
Okay.
Petra Kashmir.
So there are two questions. One is Indian question, the other one is Pakistan question, right? What will be the third question for people like people who are not connected with this, right? People living in Britain or people living in US, they don't bother about neither India nor Pakistan. They want to know what is the actual term, right? So look at BBC, what word they have been using for POK, and they don't call it occupied or liberated, right? This is applicable to some time back when the LTT was very active, and there was also the same kind of position, right? A position occupied by LTT was called a liberated position, where the Sri Lankan army called it as occupied position. And if you look at the same thing in Palestine and Israel, the same thing applied. Wherever there is a conflict, and media, they have been taking a different position without subscribing to the position of this side or that side, right? So, and there are so many words, do or die, and unity in diversity. There is a lot of politics behind this. One has to be very careful, and one has to be familiar with this kind of thing, that before you go for, particularly when you trying to translate the media text, I would recommend you to take care of these kind of words. And if you look at the filmic language, filmic medium, they have 5 domains, right? 5 ways to communicate. In a film, there are 5 different layers or mediums, or 5 different ideas put together. They have been communicating, right? Like my film has had 5 ways to communicate meaning to the viewer. The first one is the photographic image. The second one is graphics. Third one is speech. Fourth one is sound and sound effects. And fifth one is music. So it's a combination of different kinds of different layers of mediums and put together, and they have been conveying the message. So we need to find out which area that we want to work, right? we have to separate the kinds of text that we need to translate. And essentially, these are 5 different layers of meaning. Their individual combination establishes the meaning of the individual film text. So, film text meaning is film text is being established through these kind of 5 different layers. And meaningful. This is called multimodality. Yeah, some scholars call it as multimodality. And multimodal texts are text those meanings where are realized through more than one semiotic code. So multimodal, it offered through multimodal thing and through multiple or more than one semiotic codes that we have to learn and understand. That is the challenge before us. And polysemiotic nature of audiovisual product. If you look at not only film, any television programs or television messages, that they all carry the polysemiotic content, right? They have polysemiotic messages, and this means that they function simultaneously on 2 different levels. Screen products are polysemiotic. In other words, they are made up of numerous codes that interact to produce a single effect. Yeah, that's what the scholars say. If you look at this screen, probably you'll know that there are 4 domains, right? Visual, acoustic, non-verbal, and verbal. And visual non-verbal thing is something like that all those are available in the scenery, the lighting, the costume, the properties. So these can be called visual non-verbal thing. If you look at visual acoustic thing, they are music or background music or noise, which does not have any kind of words, right? All those things will come non-verbal acoustic thing, and there are verbal and visual verbal thing, right? Something like street signs, and which are part of the screen, right? Such kind of belong to the third one. The last one is that is visual and acoustic. That is dialogues, songs and lyrics, and poems. So we have to segregate the only one aspect of the text that we need to translate from the source to the target one, right? So there are multiple multimodal polysemiotic way of presenting film is, you have to understand. It's a self-contained illusion, and we need to be very careful in the political questions also, right? Yeah. And if you look at the history of the this is not the first time that translations are made. Long as soon as the films are being produced, that's a little history that I want to tell you. Probably it will help you to understand that what kind of question one has to take before translation things, right? If you look at the history of the translation in audiovisual products, we can notice a few trends. For example, there are the source language countries. There are some countries which are called source language countries, which in the contemporary world means English speaking countries such as the United States, the UK, and where hardly any films are imported, right? They have only the English films they have been exhibiting to their audience, and they very rarely that they come across films that are being translated or being dubbed or that being given with voiceover or other things, right? So these are called target. These are called English-speaking countries. They are called source language countries, right? They are called source language countries, and the foreign ones, and to be subtitled rather than dubbed. In Britain, film translation does not appear to be a significant issue, as the great majority of imported films are American and require no translation. Yeah, so British, it is not a problem, right? If we move on to European countries, for example, Western European countries like Poland is listed as a voiceover country. Poland always wanted to have it in the only they want to have voiceover, whereas it mostly uses subtitling in the cinemas, except in some dubbed production for children. So they don't go for any kind of dubbed products. They insist on going for subtitling or voiceover, and they don't go for the dubbing, right? That's how Poland is doing. And in Spain, if you look at the history that in between 1936 and 1975, there were over 90 ministerial guidelines, something like ordinance, were published, which were a form of prescriptive censorship. Showing films in a foreign language was officially banned because of the evil effects that film uh, can produce on society. So some of the countries, like even in India, that if you look at some of the states like Karnataka, right, they don't allow people to dub the films as they like. If you come to Pondicherry, you can get any number of Hollywood films in Tamil, any number of films in particularly in Telugu also you can see, but it's very rare to see a Hollywood film being translated to Kannada. You cannot get a copy of that easily because it is not being done. Number two, that even Malayalam also, that you find very rarely that they want to watch only in English or they don't watch it. So the market is not so good for them. But in Tamil Nadu, that every film that is being produced in Hollywood, that is getting dubbed thoroughly, and that is being screened there everywhere, and you can easily buy any number of DVDs here. Translation is often seen as a form of conquest, and there are literature like Robinson, who says that in the post-colonial translation theory, who argues that translation often seen as a form of conquest and can even become an expression of nationalism. And the smaller countries, if you look at the European and Scandinavian countries and other places like Netherlands, Belgium, Sweden, Portugal, they follow a different path with regard to film translation. If you look at the market size, you will come to know that how difficult it is to go for dubbing, and they prefer to go for this. So the smaller countries have their own problems. The decision to adopt subtitling as major translation method was motivated by several factors, including small size of their populations, which are translated into limited receipts from the box office. So it goes on like this, right? The smaller countries, and it all depends on the economy, political economy, and depending on the market size and other things that they choose whether to go for dubbing. Historically, that's the same case, right? And I'll skip these things because these are all narrating the same thing. And if you look at Oscar, then Oscar, they don't have, they call foreign films only which is being dubbed, right? Other than English is called foreign, right? That's what Oscars is treating with the global vernacular languages. And the times of silent movies, translation was relatively easy to conduct. The so-called, excuse me, intertitles. Intertitles, if you would have remember that normally I used to screen a couple of scenes from Charlie Chaplin films. Charlie Chaplin films will move without titles, but they'll have intertitles where one scene will be narrated with one title, one part. They'll simply put a card and say that they are moving from one scene to the other scene. So visualization is not required for them. That so intertitle is a very popular thing. That was the earliest form of. If you look at the history, that was the earliest thing, and if you see the modern times, normally I used to play a scene from the modern times. The first 10 minutes of modern times, if you happen to watch it, many of you would have already watched it, you recall it, you will come to know that many of the Chaplin films will have intertitles, right? And it started with that. Then, if you look at the existing question, there are only two widespread modalities, right? And one is dubbing, the other one is subtitling. We'll see only these two things, but there are plenty. There are many more, right? Like voiceover and other things are available. Other modes are available. If you want me to define dubbing, dubbing is the replacement of the original speech by a voice track, which is faithful translation of the original speech and which attempts to reproduce the timing, phrasing, and lip movements of the original. So this is the biggest challenge because you cannot translation should be done in the flow, right? And you cannot change it frequently to sync with the lip synchronization. That is very problematic one, right? and timing, right? Some languages will take a little longer because every second matters in film, and you cannot have too much of time. Every second there are 24 frames, and if you have about few seconds, then it will go fast, right? So this is the it's a replacement of the original track. There will be a speech track which will be replaced with the faithfully translated content, right? Faithful translation of the original speech, which attempts to reproduce the timing, right? Trying to match with the timing, trying to match with the phrasing, and trying to match with the lip movements. It's much challenger one, right? I would say that people who have already watched Gandhi by Richard Attenborough, that is one of the well-produced translated movie. Right? I have watched both English and Tamil, and I saw that Tamil characters, as if Gandhi and Nehru and Tilak were born and brought up in Tamil Nadu. They have been speaking, they have been conversing in a much fluently. The translation was so natural and original, and it was very interesting to watch. There are very few films that in the history. There are very few films you can see that many are machine translations. They simply produce it, and before the deadline, they release the film, and we have money making was the first idea, and nobody is bothered about to trying to understand the film, understand the script, or understand the story. Instead, they are interested in watching the movie, the music, many things, right? But you may be knowing that the film Gandhi was produced by Films Development Corporation of India, right? So they took all pain to make it in Indian languages in a very beautiful way, and you will appreciate only when you started to translating some of the text, and then you'll understand that what kind of pain they have taken to make it the perfect one. And the second one is that the voice track is the new voice track. Sorry, the in dubbing the new voice track is then mixed with the original music and sound effects track. Right, the music and sound effects tracks will be there, and this voice track will be replaced with the original voice track. So automatically everything else will be the same, right? Except the dialogues, everything will be the same. So the aim is to create an illusion that the on-screen characters are speaking in the target language, be it Tamil, Telugu, and Malayalam. That we all think that the hero and heroine of Hollywood films they speak in Tamil. That kind of feeling that one has to create, then only we can sync with them, and it will be easy. The visual appearance of the film remains unaltered from the original, right? In dubbing, the biggest thing is that nothing changes in the screen, right? Nothing changes except the voice track, which is not visibly seen by the audience. And it is usually edited so as to accommodate optimum lip synchronization. They take care of cutting some kind of small film length so that to match with the flow of the story. And if you in the dubbing, the translator has to be faithful not only in the theoretical sense but also in the terms of phonological synchronization. So that is not only about the story that he has to be very careful about the sync of the characters. Dubbing is favored in nationalist countries such as Germany, Italy, and Spain, since it served to defend the national language. So some of the nationalist countries like Germany and Spain and Italy, they believe that dubbing promotes their because the characters speak in their own language, in the native language, and it safeguards the nationalism interest, right? That's what these countries are believing in. And if you look at the disadvantages of filming, dubbing, there are only one thing that I want to tell you that the text of the dubbed film can be changed beyond recognition and can be censored to conform to the local morals and political viewpoints without the audience having the slightful suspicion, right? Without knowing without having any kind of suspicion that this can be done and this can be, and that is a major disadvantage of having a dubbing. And dubbing decreases the sense of otherness. That is the advantage, right? you will not feel that after a few minutes of moving of the film that you will feel that you are watching a Tamil film, right? You are watching a Malayalam film or Telugu film or Hindi film, though it is a produced, planned, and developed and marketed by a Hollywood company. So dubbing can also be perceived as an assertion of the supremacy of the national language and its unchallenged political, economic, and cultural power within the nation's boundaries. So there is a lot of politics behind choosing whether to go for dubbing or subtitling, right? And there is pros and cons which you can discuss later, right? And we'll move on to subtitling. The second major aspect is subtitling. We'll practice it a little later, but I'll give you the theoretical base so that we can understand that, right? So subtitling can be defined as the rendering in a different language of a verbal message in the filmic media in the shape of one or more lines of written text presented on the screen in sync with the original written message. So the basic problem is that you are intruding into the filmic medium of the director, right? Even a square millimeter or even a 0.01 square inch of a film cannot be compromised by the director without his consent. But if you want to exhibit the film in, say, about 200 countries, then 200 teams of translators will work on that for subtitling, where they'll put up the bar and to make it visible, and they will intrude into the filmic medium. That is a major thing. But you have to, without compromising on the original voice and original delivery of dialogues, this can be done. So the first countries to use subtitles were Denmark and France in 1929. Soon, different preferences of the two main methods of audiovisual language transfer developed in the individual European countries. And if you look at the best practices, the words contained in the original dialogues tend to be produced between 40 to 75% in order to give viewers the chance of reading the subtitles while watching this film at the same time. If you want to watch the film and read something, you cannot translate everything 100%, right? You may have to tell the story, but without compromising the flow of the story. So the best practice says that you may have to cut down to the level of 50% to 70% while translating for the subtitling. This is the same case with dubbing also. You cannot translate everything. You cannot simply translate every word and every phrase, every command and stuff to deliver. Because the purpose is to tell the story which cannot be compromised, which cannot be lost in the process, right? And the exposure time for each subtitle should be long enough to permit comfortable reading, 3 to 5 seconds for one line and 4 to 6 for two lines. If you are putting two lines, then that should be 4 to 6 seconds. If it is only one line, then it can be up to 3 to 5 seconds. So that's the way that industrial standards have been evolved. And simple practice, that is simple exercise is enough, right? You can't have a very complex or very sophisticated or very luxurious word to a very common and popular language should be used. Should be taken into while translating the whether it is dubbing or subtitling. And subtitling has its own disadvantages, as I said, that it intrude into the medium of director, and people will find it can only be helpful to the literates, and not everyone can it. So that is a major disadvantage of subtitling, and it distort the composition of the film. That is the one thing that which no director can accept. Right? When something is entering into the filmic medium, then that will destroy the whole aesthetics of the film. And so there are a couple of other disadvantages for the subtitling also. We'll go to the directly to the other aspects, right? Yeah, voiceover. The third one is voiceover. In some countries, right? I remember that during my stay in Sri Lanka, that the militant groups, right? I won't call anyone as a terrorist because I believe in many of the people that who have been working on that, right? So the militants, they used to exhibit films on the roads, even in Tamil Nadu. That I remember that in the southern districts of Tamil Nadu, that to propagate political movies, right? If you want to propagate some ideological movies, and if you want to make people to believe in them, and even Gandhi is a political film, right? And if you want to screen them when there is no facility to go for uh, either dubbing or subtitling, then uh, only one character will be there, one translator will be there who narrates the story, right? Instead of telling the story word by word or character by character translation, they used to give a kind of thing that's a political movements normally carry forward these things, and they have achieved a lot through these kind of that is embodiment of if you want to define voiceover can be defined as a technique in which disembodied voice can be heard over the original soundtrack, which remains audible but indecipherable to the audiences. To date, this modality is on the screen has been very much overlooked and under-researched by academics. So this one area that because dubbing and subtitling are a very popular one, and the voiceover for the entire film commercially it is not viable because nobody will uh, love the story to do that unless it is politically motivated, unless you are highly motivated to watch a film to understand some political or other message. If you are a religious person, if you want to know something, then unless you have such kind of commitment and involvement over some kind of idea, then voiceover cannot work. And there is one more thing called, apart from voiceover, subtitling, and dubbing, something called same language subtitling, right? To illustrate that, I need to play a 5 minutes video. Probably you may have to watch it, right? I'll stop this and I'll move on to the, for example, this is, watch it for 3 or 4 minutes and then we'll do that, right? There is something on the screen. Yeah. This is a BBC documentary that talks about same language subtitling. I'll play it for a few minutes so that you
It's probably fair to say that Indians are obsessed with the glamour and romance of Bollywood. So in a nation which has more illiterate people than any other country, it's a wonder that it's taken till now to harness Bollywood's mass appeal and put it to good use. Amos Roberts meets a very clever man whose simple idea is changing the lives of hundreds of millions of people.
We love to escape our reality through fantasy movies. We like to express our romantic self sometimes through songs. Sometimes I ask myself, what is it that unites India? And I think there are two things. One of them is cricket and the other is Bollywood.
Bridge Kothari believes Bollywood has the potential to transform as well as unite India. It's not simply the films, it's the subtitles he adds to them. This isn't karaoke. It turns out that subtitling popular songs is an enormously effective tool for teaching people how to read.
Essentially what we've created is a context in which reading becomes an automatic process. And you don't have to even think about it. Your brain will do the matching of sound and text.
It's Gujarati villages like this one that make up Bridge Kotari's laboratory. He's now spent 15 years studying the impact of same-language subtitling on literacy. For most of his life, Mohochi Motaji Thakur was illiterate.
I'll stop it here because it's a long film that it's Bollywood Lessons, a BBC documentary available online. You can watch it. It insists that same language subtitling, right? When you watch a Hindi film, then when you put the Hindi subtitling, then it improves. It helps to learn the Hindi easily, and particularly in English also. That if you put up the English subtitles, then it helps people to understand. That can bypass the problem of accent and other issues, right? So same language subtitling, I'll stop it here and I'll come back to the, give me 1 second. Yeah. So I will go back to the slide again, right? Yeah. So same language subtitling is very popular in advancing the idea of the mother tongue, and it's he even played it in railway stations, and he has taken it to the army where soldiers are there. So it helps him to advance, particularly. He was a Cornell University researcher, and he has been doing it for more than 1.5 decades, and he found it very and there are a couple of research that has already been done on this. They say that subtitles change the film from an audiovisual medium to a more literary medium, which requires a greater level of attention from a viewer than a Dept film. So it has become an instructional tool for people to take forward the language. So it started in 2002, and they have been trying to put up same language subtitling in the Rangoli, very popular yesterday's popular thing, right? And now we'll see that a quick idea of what now today that I'll be screening a 5 minutes video of the popular film called Life of Pi, right? That is in English, and I have a script of that, and which you have to try to translate in your own language, whatever it is. And we'll have very little time, right? We cannot watch it more. Before that, you have to know what are the components of a script. First, you watch a script now, right? I'll show the script of, say, that is the Life of Pi script. I'll show you, right? Yeah. If you see this is easily available online, right? You can simply download this, and this is, yeah, I'll scroll it slowly so that you can see this, right? This is Life of Pi by David Magee, and based on original novel by Jan Martel, and other they use the typewriter font, right? That is a standard, and that is available. That is a established norm. And if you see this, you can see that scene number 1. The left side, you can see right side there's a page number, right? So this is scene number 1, where ext refers to exterior, and refers to that it's a Pondicherry Zoo, and in India, 1961, it's a day. So the first line always start with the location in which you have been working, right? So it says that the film opens at Pondicherry on a 1964 day, and it talks about the and it narrates that for the person that will be on the screen. And the first dialogue starts here. You can see it here. I hope you are able to see this, right? So this is right. This part where you can see that the writer, right? Writer voiceover. Voiceover means he won't be appearing on the screen, but something else will be shown. And the first ever dialogue is, "You were raised in a zoo," right? "You were raised in a zoo" was the first dialogue, and then second scene starts. Second scene again the same, right? Exterior, Pondicherry Zoo, India, 1961 day, and there is some explanation about the scene, and there is an adult pie, right? So the adult pie is the one that first character, he speaks something, right? Born and raised in Pondicherry, right? This is how this goes. So we'll go back again to watch the uh, the PPT, so that we can see quickly about what is I'll show you. Yeah. Now we have to see what are the major elements of a major elements of a script, right? Screenplay, what are the major elements of there? You can see that first one is scene heading. It always started with the scene headings, and then the character names are there. So anything that is followed by a character name is nothing but dialogue. So character name is always given in all capital letters, right? So anything that follows will be delivered by that particular character. So the character name element is where you indicate who is talking. And then dialogue. Dialogue is anything that followed the character name is dialogue. Dialogue is simply every word we hear on the screen, everything that comes out of everyone's mouth, whether we see them on the screen or not, like the one that we see earlier, right? Voiceover of the writer, right? We saw that that was the first dialogue, right? So everything should be given in the dialogue page. Then transition, how the scene transits from one place to the next one. That is normally given to the editors and cameraman and other thing. These are all will be there. And then very important points that I want to make is that it's a storytelling, right? I have to tell you that in newspapers that where I worked earlier, they used to give us one wire service, right? From PTA or UNI news agency, news will be given to us for translation. And the instruction given at the board will be that read, understand, and throw the copy, then write on your own, right? That's how that the copies are different from if somebody is getting something from, say, London, and that is being given to all the Tamil newspapers, the same copy will be given. But you can see different stories in different papers, because that is not mechanically reproduced. The writers, the journalists, they adapt it to their own audience level, their own style, house style, and apart from that, you can see that certain stories you can find that these are all being translated by one X or Y, because they have their own signature. They kind of word, the choice of words, right? So and now in film translation also, you have to keep in mind that you have to translate only the dialogues, and number two, you have to keep it in mind that you can't translate 100%. Number three, you have to try to tell the story, right? Story is important than the translation of the text. I'll play it. Yeah, these things are enough, right? Now you can see the. Yeah, now I will close it. I will go for screening the first 5 minutes or less than 5 minutes of the film, right? Probably that will give you some idea about the first dialogue and a few things, right? Starts with a beautiful song.
Good morning.
The way of God. Far from it, I was named after.
Is it audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. I will raise it to the maximum level.
Zoo. Born and raised. in Pondicherry, in what was the fake on the Bengal monitor lizard. Mother and I. Way of karma, huh? The way of God. Far from it, I was named after a swimming pool. They say the doctor swung Francis around by the ankles to clear the water out.
Well, he said he was friends with your father.
Oh, he's my honorary uncle. I call it. His lessons would save my life in the end.
Good boy. Huh? You were going to tell me how you got your name, I think.
Oh, yes, Mamaji. Mamaji collects swimming pools. He swims in every... One day Mamaji said to my father, copy with it, that a single swim there changed his life. One day to swim in the piscine Molito. Imagine me trying to explain that name.
Look at him, he is busy.
With
Oh, missing in the schoolyard. He said missing, guys.
When we returned the next year for our first day of school, I was prepared.
Good morning. I am piscine monitor, which is also used in mathematics to represent the ratio of as 3.14.
But I still had the whole day ahead of me. French class was next.
These are the first 20 decimal places of pi.
I will stop it here and I will show you the SRT files, right? SRT files are the one that normally being given to the translators, right? That will have just time codes and that will, I will show you the, you see the sample SRT files. Yeah. Yeah, instead of giving the screenplay is meant for the producers, not the producers, the directors and the cameramen, artists and other things. This is meant for the artist. All the SRT files are available. All the Hollywood films SRT files are available online. You can download it, which will have only two things. One is time code and the first dialogue, right? You are raised in a zoo. That was the first dialogue, right? So people can directly simply translate this and that can be delivered the appropriate place. There are a couple of tools available, right? Celltext is one tool, open source tool that is available to prepare the script, the screenplay and other thing. Very popular and very sophisticated tool. And the second one is Subtitle Workshop, right? Subtitle Workshop is another open source tool. And these things can be helpful to develop these kind of things. This can be developed with the help of Subtitle Workshop, which is the open source tool available online free, right? So let me stop at this moment, and I'm looking forward to. So what I'm trying to say is that film translation is something different from other forms of other kinds of translation, like translating movies or textbooks or even news stories are translated in a different way. Whereas you have to be a little familiar with the component of a screenplay and the component of a script particularly, and you should be familiar with this form of storytelling. Storytelling is the most primary thing other than anything else, right? And you can compromise on the length and you need not bother about the number of words that you have been reproducing to the audience. So these are the basic things one has to keep it in mind, and it will be very interesting to translate a movie script, and I hope you will have a chance to work on this when you have a time, right? Thank you, and I'm looking forward to answer your questions if at all there is any question.
Kanika Chawan.
Yeah, very informative question. Is dubbing closer to domestication and subtitling closer to foreignization? Right. Recently, there has been a debate over this, that which one should be preferred, dubbing or subtitling. Actually, apart from these things, right? Apart from foreignization or Domestication, the cost involved, I would say that it's not easy. That if there are 55 characters in the film, you have to look for 55 voices, which is not easy, right? The primary, the lead role that who has been taking, the antagonist, protagonist, and everyone, that you have to look for separate voices. Even if there are two children in the film, then you have to look for two different voices. So it is very expensive compared to subtitling. Subtitling, actually, we did a some time back. 3 Italians came to us and we did a wonderful documentary. It was completely in Italian. It was in Tamil. Actually, they wanted in English. So they introduced the subtitle workshop where we had to make it in. That is very simple. Within a day, we learned the software and we were able to deliver within a day the complete time-coded script, which was simultaneously translated into many European languages. But if you look at dubbing, then if there were 8 characters in a film, then I have to look for 8 different most apt voice, right? You can't choose whatever voice you like. That should match with the character and the size and the quality of each artist, right? So that is one thing. Number one, that it involves the economics, and number two, domestication. Actually, it's a politics actually. Number two, that subtitling requires you need to have the knowledge of literacy, right? Otherwise, you cannot do that, right? So if you want to, why Karnataka is controlling the people not to go for any kind of translation of movies of particularly Hollywood. They are very particular. They don't want to allow them to watch Hollywood films in regional in one particular language, right? There are, if you look at throughout the world, there are plenty of cases one can see. So I would say that there is nothing to prefer here unless you have the agenda. Whatever be your political agenda, that will decide the choice of the medium. Yeah, choice of the tool and technique.
Sir, is subtitling and dubbing remunerative?
Actually, it all depends on whom with you are working, right? For example, I had translated for many people, right? As a journalist, I had to work with a newspaper where the salary was fixed, right? But I was asked by UNESCO, when I was a consultant to UNESCO, I worked in Sri Lanka. They wanted me to translate one book. The agreement was per page there was a dollar, right? US dollar rate was given to me. I think that was one of the huge amount that I earned that was helpful to construct. A part of the money was used for construction of my house also, right? So one good deal would enough for you to have fortune, right? So if you translate about 5 books for international rate, probably you can buy a good car or you can go for even a good apartment in Chennai. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
So it all depends on with whom that you have been engaging, right? If the contract is with the international agreements, probably you'll get in good dollars, about few $1,000s.
So there's one more question.
Yeah.
What subtitling software do you recommend, sir? Bukar Anupama has asked.
Yeah, I would suggest Subtitle Workshop. Subtitle Workshop is the open source tool, and you can go for CELTX, CLTX. These two, CELTX is a comprehensive tool that is meant for, again, that's not a open source, that's a freeware, but there are higher versions are available on proprietary payment. But you can start with the CELTX and Subtitle Workshop. I also enjoyed it. Thank you for the good questions, and thank you, Christian College friends and students and colleagues. It was a great opportunity to interact with you. Thank you so much.